I never expected a journey could change my perception of poverty forever. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. It was a rainy morning, gray clouds hanging like a heavy shroud over the city, drenching the streets in a relentless downpour. As I stood there, watching water swirl around my worn shoes, I felt a chill deep in my bones. The world around me felt suffocating, and yet I was drawn to the buzzing energy of my surroundings. Tired eyes stared back at me through foggy windows, bodies huddled under rickety awnings, faces etched with worry, desperation hanging in the air like smoke. All their stories were muted, their silence screamed louder than the crack of thunder overhead. Just last week, everything had seemed so hopeful. I had a steady job, a cozy apartment, and friends who anchored me in my sea of ambition. We laughed together, joked about life, and never thought we'd be swept away by something as unpredictable as fate. I thought I understood struggle until that fateful day when I chanced upon the hidden underbelly of our city. When I stumbled upon the vacant lot, I found an unexpected gathering. There, amidst piles of discarded dreams and empty bottles, I met Maria. Her child was wrapped tightly in a ragged blanket, tiny fingers barely visible. Beneath her dirt-streaked skin, I saw resilience, a glimmer of light that outshone my darkest fears. She told me of her dreams vibrant and alive as if the world hadn't stolen everything from her. I wanted to touch her heart, to share my own, but my hands trembled with unspoken emotions. Life was still bustling around us, car horns blaring, sirens slicing through the air like knives. Yet, in that moment, everything faded. Her story poured into me, a cascade of pain, hope, and burning will to survive. As the storm intensified, I felt a warmth rising within me, it swallowed the chill. Who was I to judge? I didn't know their scars or their battles, yet here I stood, an outsider desiring to understand. Suddenly, a harsh voice shattered my reverie. A man appeared, gaunt and wild-eyed, shouting at those gathered, demanding they leave. My heart raced. I could feel the collective dread hovering above us, thickening like the darkening skies. Mariah's face twisted in fear, the storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest within her eyes. I wanted to step forward, to say something, to protect her somehow. But my feet were glued to the ground. In that instant, the walls of my reality began to crack. Was poverty just a failure of the system or a test of character? Could we be blind to such suffering? I felt as if I were tumbling down a dark rabbit hole, each terrifying revelation pulling me deeper into despair. With an unexpected lurch, the crowd dispersed, scattering like leaves in the wind, leaving behind a hollow silence that echoed in my chest. Maria's eyes followed the retreating figures, a single tear slipped down her dirty cheek, catching the dim light. I could feel my heart twisting painfully. What would happen to her now? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference, let's connect. I stood there, paralyzed, as the remnants of the crowd slipped away, each figure dissolving into the gray haze of the rain. Clutching my umbrella tighter, I felt the weight of Mariah's gaze on me, heavy yet imploring, as if she were begging me to take a step, to do something, anything. What could I possibly offer her? I was just a bystander, a spectator to her pain, but instead of running from that ache, I felt it root itself deeper within me, a constant reminder of the morning's revelation. Could I turn my back on someone whose dreams had become shadows? I wanted to believe I was stronger than that I could extend my hand, even in the storm. For a fleeting moment, my heart swelled with a pulsing determination, and I took a step toward her. Maria, I whispered through shattering breaths. What can I do? Her expression shifted, surprise flickering across her tired features. You can't do anything, she murmured, glancing toward the empty street. In the end, we all go back to our lives, and am left here with nothing, but I don't have to leave. I want to help, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush, laced with urgency. Her child stirred slightly beneath the frayed blanket, his small face peeking out, innocence catching the rain-soaked world like a fleeting summer's day. I faltered, struggling against the swell of emotions. I can bring you food, or clothes. Maybe I can find someone to help. Her laugh was brittle, tinged with disbelief. Help? You think that will change anything? Unless you can build a roof over my head or give me back my life, there's nothing you can do. As she turned away, a gnawing desperation took hold of me. The world had seemed so bright, so promising just yesterday, and now it felt like a dark labyrinth of helplessness. I felt the walls closing in, my heart a drum echoing in the chaos. No. Wait. I called out, reaching for her hand, desperate to connect, to prove that I meant what I said. I can at least listen. Please, share your story with me. You don't have to carry it alone. For a heartbeat, Maria hesitated, her head lowered, fresh clouds of doubt crossing her features. Then she sighed, a sound heavy with resignation, and turned slowly back to me. You really want to know? She asked, and I nodded before she continued, a barely discernible tremor in her voice. That I was once like you, she began, eyes drifting toward the swollen river running through the streets. I had dreams, once filled with color and warmth. I wanted to be a teacher, to change lives, to create something beautiful. The rain seemed to soften, the droplets falling lighter between us, as she began to unravel the tapestry of her past. But when my husband lost his job, everything changed. I fought to keep us afloat, but the waves became too strong. He left, unable to bear it anymore. Her words trembled as they fell, weaving a poignant tale of abandonment and sacrifice. That I listened, riveted, feeling her pain intertwine with my own. I wanted to reach out to express my sorrow, my shared humanity, but the words remained stuck in my throat. The engulfing reality of her situation washed over me in waves, and all I could do was absorb her truth, as if by doing so I could somehow ease her burden. Then, just as the clouds began to shift, casting a beam of pale sunlight upon the once dreary street, I noticed a figure approaching. An old man, clad in a torn jacket that billowed around him like ghostly wings, moved slowly through the rain, limping with purpose. He seemed both a part of the city and wholly separate from it, a relic, perhaps, of lives long lived. As he neared, he stopped, his gaze landing on Maria and her child. Here, he croaked, a small backpack clutched in his arms. Take this. He reached inside and pulled out a handful of apples, their skins pockmarked but surprisingly bright against the muted backdrop. Tears welled in Maria's eyes, and in that moment, I could see a flicker of hope igniting her weary spirit. Why? She managed to ask, her voice quaking with disbelief. The old man shrugged, an ambiguous smile playing on his lips. Sometimes, we must share a bit of our light, even when we're shrouded in darkness. That he placed the apples in her trembling hands and shuffled away, leaving a tangible warmth behind that seeped into the frigid air. Maria clutched the fruit tightly, the gesture swaying her heart, a vulnerable, beautiful moment suspended in time. But as her eyes glistened with gratitude, I felt a sudden pang of worry. What if this kindness was the last? What if the next hand reached out to Maria was not one of compassion, but hostility, something that would further dim the fragile light she had just begun to grasp? Before I could voice my fears, distant sirens began to slice through the air, growing closer and louder. My heart raced anew as I turned to Maria, who had gone still, her face pale and drawn. I need to go, I whispered, panic tightening my chest. Don't, she replied, her voice shaking. We can't be seen together. They may take me away. In that moment, with the sound of approaching chaos mingling with the pounding of rain, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, an overwhelming sense of dread washing over me. How could I leave her in this uncertainty? I opened my mouth to protest, to offer some last desperate plan, but suddenly, everything spiraled into uncertainty. A distant shout echoed as shadows emerged through the rain. I turned, heart thundering in my chest, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. The specter of fate had arrived, and it carried the weight of a storm far greater than the one outside. The sirens wailed like a pack of wolves on the hunt, shattering the fragile bubble of hope that had momentarily enclosed us. In an instant, the street transformed into a stage set for calamity. Shadows moved purposefully, figures emerging from the downpour with haste and authority. A chill crept through me, freezing the words in my throat. "Maria," I breathed, panic rising, clenching my fists. "What do we do?" Her eyes darted, flickering with fear that mirrored my own. "You have to go. Please, just go," she insisted, her voice urgent, fraying at the edges. But a primal instinct urged me to stay, to stand guard against the encroaching darkness that threatened to engulf the light of kindness we had just witnessed. And oh, I won't abandon you, I pleaded, my heart racing not just with fear but with an unwavering resolve. With a glance over her shoulder, she shushed me. "You don't understand. If they see you with me, they'll think you're involved. They can take you too." Her worry struck me harder than the rain pelting down around us. I felt the weight of her despair, each droplet blurring the boundary between us and the approaching figures, people who were perhaps the very embodiment of the societal machine that had left her fragmented, hopeless, and alone. "Please," she urged softly, her desperation palpable as her hands trembled around the apples, their vibrant hue now somehow muted against the gravity of the moment. "Just go," but I couldn't fathom leaving her to face whatever fate awaited her. I stepped closer, framing her in my gaze, willing her to see the truth of my heart. "Don't you get it? You matter. It'll help you," the sirens crescendoed, casting a dark shadow over our resolve. Just then, a man in a crisp uniform burst into view, glaring around, his demeanor terse and commanding. The air thickened as he shouted orders to others behind him. I locked eyes with Maria, and for a fleeting instant, 1,000 unspoken words passed between us, a shared understanding that transcended our circumstances. There was valor in her vulnerability, a fierce strength that begged to be acknowledged. With her child nestled protectively against her chest, Mariah's expression softened, even as the fear remained. She reached out, her fingers brushing against mine for just a moment, grounding us both against the storm of uncertainty. "Remember me," she whispered, a haunting plea that echoed in my soul. "You promised to listen. Please don't forget what you saw and heard." A bitter taste settled in my mouth as I felt the moment slipping away. Then she turned, determination cutting through her fear like a knife. "Run!" she shouted, her voice trembling with urgency. "Now! Before it's too late." In that raw moment, I ran. I turned away and sprinted into the downpour, my heart echoing with the call of someone who needed to be saved, though I wasn't sure who that someone was anymore. The pounding of my feet matched the thunder rumbling overhead as I vanished into the fog of rain, knowing I was leaving behind a part of myself that I could never reclaim. But as I turned around for one last glimpse, bracing for what I might see, the startling image of her small figure framed against the chaos flooded my vision. I wanted to run back, to sweep her into my arms and shield her from whatever tide was coming. Instead, I felt the weight of despair and unwanted companion set in. Just as quickly, I heard a commotion behind me, followed by a piercing shriek that tore through the veil of rain, freezing my blood. I stumbled, my heart crashing in unison with the alarm bells in my mind. I shouldn't have left. Rage and guilt collided in me, igniting a fire that pushed me back toward the scene unfolding in the midst of the chaos. But before I could take a single step, a figure caught my eye, a flicker of red against the dismal grays of the storm. It was the old man who had shared his apples with Maria, eyes narrowed and body poised defiantly against the armed figures, a beacon of unexpected courage that seemed out of place amid the harrowing sight. "Leave her alone," he shouted, his voice rising above the discord, a wild, haunting sound in the deluge. "She's done no wrong." I stood frozen as he faced off against the very force I had feared so intensely, uncertainty pulsing in my chest. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but something bound me there, a reluctant witness to his bravery. The sirens and shouts fused together into a cacophony, drowning out all thoughts of escape. As I stood there, my heart pounding wildly, I felt the universe shift once more, the weight of destiny creeping in, promised and profound. And in the stillness after his cry, as if time itself had halted, I knew I would never be the same. The moment stretched like a taut string, poised to break, and in that moment of breathing silence, everything hung in the balance. The rain lessened to a gentle drizzle, but the weight of what was happening sustained an unyielding heaviness in the air. I stood rooted to the ground, fear and admiration coursing through me as I watched the old man stand firm, hands clenched into fists at his sides. The figures in uniform had halted, surprised by his audacity, the chaos around them momentarily disrupted by his presence. "Who do you think you are?" one of them barked, stepping forward with a menacing stride, but the old man didn't waver. His resolve was palpable, igniting something dormant within me, something I couldn't define yet felt gravely important, someone who knows injustice when I see it. The man declared defiantly, each word delivered with the gravity of an unyielding truth. "You can't just come here and take her away. Not again. Not like this." I flinched as the statement ignited a memory buried deep in the recesses of my mind, a flickering image of my childhood home, corners shadowed with whispered secrets of struggles and closures, the seeds of privilege planted firmly in the soil of my ignorance. Did this man know the weight of poverty, the pain of being stripped of dignity and identity? Did he understand that nothing could erase the scars? Yet here he was, screaming on behalf of a woman who had been relentless in her own quiet dignity, a testament to the resilience I had often overlooked. Just then, the memory of Maria came flooding back, her face infused with determination and fear. I saw her eyes reflected in the rain-soaked pavement, shimmering with a mix of hope and sorrow, a reminder that the struggle for dignity went hand in hand with survival. As the confrontation escalated, an uncomfortable knot formed in my throat. I knew I needed to act, but dread gnawed at every certainty I had once held. What could I, a mere observer, do against such an oppressive presence? Just when I thought all was lost, I noticed a small figure creeping toward the action. Maria's child, perhaps drawn by the commotion, small fingers gripping a tattered toy, its edges worn and frayed. The little one drew closer to the tumult, unaware of the impending danger, a tiny beacon of innocence amongst the turmoil of adults tangled in bravado. "Stop!" I shouted instinctively, as if my voice alone could alter the trajectory of fate. "Don't!" The soldier turned, surprise flickering across his features, but it quickly morphed into annoyance. "Get away from here, kid!" he snapped, stepping forward with hostility, making my heart race. Without thinking, I sprinted to the child, driven by a surge of instinct. "Come back!" I urged, kneeling down, my heart pounding as I looked into those wide eyes filled with confusion and fear. "It's not safe here." Before I could pull the child back, the old man raised his voice again, this time even louder, attention shifting momentarily back to him. "What you're doing is wrong. She's a mother." I glanced back, seeing Maria's face etched with terror, but layered beneath it was an unmistakable pride. She had fought for her child, for her place, for dignity. And now it was a battle of warriors in different forms, the old man, an overworked sentinel against the adversity of the world, and Maria, a fierce protector who had found her footing despite a world intent on erasing her. "Stay with me," I called to the child, offering a hand. But in that moment, just as darkness loomed heavily over us, an unexpected kindness broke the tense. Iona figure emerged from behind the police lines, a woman dressed in a denim jacket, hair tied tightly back. She rushed toward us, her gaze locked on the old man. "Let her go," she yelled, her voice fierce yet filled with compassion. "You have no right." The air shifted once again, infused with a flicker of hope. My heart raced. This was a small yet powerful act of defiance. Could resistance, sparked by kindness, perhaps turn the tide? The scene was electric, a clash of hearts and wills as people began to gather, drawn by the ripples of courage. A patchwork of humanity formed as those watching found their voices, echoing the old man's words, standing in solidarity. Yet, amidst this momentary alliance, I felt a weight in my chest that told me it wasn't over. Somewhere deep in the gathering storm, I sensed that the confrontation would not be so easily resolved. Each echo carried with it the possibility for fear, pain, and the unknown, but just as I thought hope might fracture the darkness, another lock clicked in the distance, the sound slicing through the resolved voices. I turned, my heart sinking, witnessing the grim silhouettes of more uniformed figures arriving reinforcements. With horror and determination intertwined, I faced the scene unfolding before me. I needed to protect not just Maria, but the legacy of hope she had ignited in me. As the crowd began to murmur in fear, the old man stood resolutely, preparing to face the wave of adversity rallying against us, and then, just before confusion could morph into chaos, I made a decision. As the rain continued to wash away the lines between right and wrong, I locked eyes with Maria once more, a silent promise taking root in my soul that I wouldn't abandon her again. I would stand beside her, no matter the cost, ready to challenge the uncertainty of the path ahead. And as the world around me darkened, I stepped forward, willing to face whatever came next, heart pounding with the knowledge that our journey had only just begun. And in that moment of profound clarity, a shocking realization struck me. The child cradled in Maria's arms bore an uncanny resemblance to someone I had lost long ago, a haunting reminder that the journey of the heart often unfolds in the most unexpected ways, threading through pain, compassion, and the promise of connection. The rain, now reduced to a soft murmur, still held the tension of the impending storm that lay heavier in the air than any downpour could describe. As I stood there, the faces around me blurred into a backdrop of emotions: fear, anger, and that lingering thread of hope woven through the defiance that had sprung forth not just from the old man, but from the gathering crowd. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken words, a spell binding us all together, yet I felt entirely alone as apprehension gnawed at my insides. Maria's eyes, filled with the weight of sacrifice and love, locked onto mine as if searching for something I wasn't sure I could provide. I saw in her gaze the shadows of all the battles fought, all the trials endured by countless women like her, the ghost of a mother's struggle etched deep within the fabric of her being. Could I truly be the ally she needed? Noticing the reinforcements closing in, I felt the dread settle in like cold water, creeping up my spine and rendering me momentarily immobile. An inner voice whispered my own insecurities. What could I possibly do in the face of such force? But just before I could falter, something extraordinary occurred. The woman in the denim jacket who had rushed to support us pressed forward, rallying those beside her to push back against the advancing line of uniforms. "Do you not see the humanity in her? In any of us?" she shouted, her voice rising like a beacon piercing through the heaviness of uncertainty. Behind her, voices began to rise, each note a plea for recognition of our shared existence, a harmony of shared pain and support that echoed peerless rage against the abuse being perpetuated right before us. A wave of unity rippled through the crowd as strangers began to reach for one another, hands clasping tightly, an army woven together not by program or protocol, but by the aching, unyielding need for justice. In that moment, I felt a shift. The panic within me began to crack and break, giving way to a spark of courage, urging me forward. I moved closer to Maria, drawn by a force I couldn't quite name. "I'm here," I managed to say, though my voice was a fragile thread. The child clinging to her stared up, eyes wide with innocence, as if sensing the weight of 100 unspoken decisions resting upon our shoulders. Maria's grip tightened on the small figure, and I could see a war of emotions wash over her face. Fear, yes, but a steely resolve sparkled beneath it, igniting something deep within me. It was a reminder of all the small moments of kindness I had overlooked in my own privilege. All those times I had shuffled past the struggles of others, silent and self-consumed, could not erase the truth that hung thick in the air now. Just then, my attention was pulled back to the denim-clad woman. She turned briefly, offering me a note, a silent acknowledgement that I was part of this collective stand. I felt small but crucial, like a heartbeat surrounded by a chorus that spoke of resistance forged through shared humanity. As the soldier in command barked orders to his men, the tension rose, an electric current risking eruption. My heart raced now, buoyed by the gathering strength, the realization that defiance often intertwined with hope. I inhaled deeply, finally feeling the warmth swell within me amid the chaos, as if courage thrummed in my veins, a promise I had silently made to Maria and those around her. But then, the momentary warmth was snatched away, as I heard a sharp cry pierce through the crowd. It was the child, the small figure released from Maria's embrace in a sudden rush toward the looming wall of force. The air thickened with gasps of horror and dismay, the collective breath of despair washing over all of us at once. "No!" I shouted, instinctively lunging forward as the realization sunk in. Time slowed as everything around me blurred. I fought through the mass of bodies, propelled by instinct, the child's fear-filled eyes drawing me closer. Yet, just as our fingertips grazed, a hand caught my arm, yanking me to a halt. The grip was strong, unyielding. I looked up, and to my horror, I recognized the face of a figure from my past, the one who had long cast shadows over my most treasured memories. "Let go of me." I spat, furious at the sudden appearance of this unwelcome reminder of everything I had tried to escape. The voice was like gravel, cold and unyielding. "I should have known you'd find your way back here, again trying to play savior." I struggled against their grip, heart pounding in my chest as I fought not only against the confines of their hold but also against the tightly wound fears of self-doubt that rushed to the forefront of my mind. Questions erupted like firecrackers. What was I becoming? A puppet on strings tangled in the expectations of others, or could I redefine what my role would be? As I wrestled with this raging turmoil, I glimpsed again at Maria, standing firm as forces closed in, her child still struggling against the tide, desperately reaching out. The shadows stretched longer, enveloping us all in uncertain. To me, resistance was a ripple in a deeper current, and as I found my voice amidst the chaos, with my spirit finally ignited, I realized what I must do. The revelation struck me with clarity. This journey had unveiled not just the pain surrounding poverty and injustice but the vulnerability of every soul fighting to break free. But before I could shout a word in defiance or move toward the child, the air exploded with the deafening sound of silence engulfed by impending power, a signal of the unseen storm. Reinforcements surged forward like a wave, and despair pierced my heart once more. The weight of the world pressed down, precariously poised on the edge of chaos. Would I reach the child in time? Would Mariah's courage falter, or would voices filled with defiance drown out the cries for conformity? With everything hanging delicately, I braced against my own fear, ready to face this haunting truth head-on. And in that charged moment, my heart whispered what I had not yet fully understood: sometimes, to find a way forward, one must first walk through the shadows. The air thickened with anticipation as I stood torn between the urgency to save the child and the immobilizing grip of my past. The figure who held mid-air presence clouded the moment, darkening my thoughts and wrapping them in fear. It was a cruel reminder of the past I tried to shed, and the weight of that encounter threatened to bury me beneath its familiar heaviness. "Let go of me," I repeated, my voice a raw whisper of desperation, yet still, I felt the unyielding pressure of their hand. I strained against it, heart racing as the sounds of the crowd morphed into a cacophony of chaos. The world around me became an amalgamation of movement and noise, unstoppable yet somehow distant. In that tumult, Mariah's determined expression held my gaze, her depth of courage igniting a flicker of my own. I sensed her fear, yet also a fierce resolve. She wouldn't waver, not now. Her child still reached out, fingers stretching toward a distant hope I so desperately wanted to grasp. What kind of person would I be if I stood idly by? "Let them go," I shouted, my voice carrying over the roar. I could feel the eyes of the crowd turning toward me. Some were wide with fear, others glimmering with a tentative hope. It stirred something in the depths of my chest, a bond forged from shared struggle, a silent pact that whispered we could rise together. But the figure before me tightened their grip, hissing a response so closely I could feel the bitterness of their breath. "You think you can just turn back into a hero? This isn't your fight." Their words, like shards of glass, cut deep. I could feel the walls of my past closing in, echoing tales of failure and lost purpose. But amid the ache, a clarity began to resonate, a glimmer of truth that rose like smoke from the ashes of doubt. Why should my past define my present? Why couldn't I step into the light? With a sudden surge of defiance, I twisted free from their grip, propelled by the roar of the crowd that surged with me. I didn't have time to consider the consequences. All I knew was that I had to act. Each heartbeat rang like a drum against the uncertainty, thrumming with urgency as I sprinted toward the child and Maria. The world around me dimmed, replaced with the singular intensity of reaching that little girl. I was not alone. I could feel the collective strength building, an invisible tether that connected us all, weaving together our fears and aspirations. But then, as I leaped forward, pure adrenaline coursing through my veins, the ground seemed to quiver beneath the advancing soldiers. I locked eyes with the child, whose innocence shone like a beacon amid the chaos. "Don't be afraid. I'm coming," I called out, hoping against hope she could hear me through the swell of mounting anxiety. In that moment, however, I felt another shift, an unsettling sensation as time slowed once more. A sudden, chilling sound cut through the air, a distant explosion, followed by the sharp crackle of shouting. An unexpected panic surged, freezing the crowd in collective horror. "Stand down!" the officer yelled, his voice slicing through the fog. The soldiers seemed to retreat, though not entirely, forming a wall of tension that threatened to erupt. The air vibrated with uncertainty, a potent storm brewing just out of sight, one that could shatter what little resolve remained. I glanced back to Maria, her eyes wide with shock and uncertainty. "We have to go now," she urged, pulling the child close. My heart fluttered with dread. This was not the end we had hoped for. The confrontation I had anticipated was now replaced by a palpable fear of losing the fight altogether. And then I felt an unexpected swell of kindness cutting through the haze of despair. A young man with a determined expression stepped forward from the crowd, arms raised in a gesture of peace. "Let's not do this. We can work together," he called out, his voice lifting above the chaos like a buoy in a stormy sea. But even as I felt the warmth of character amidst the turmoil, reality loomed. Before we could respond, a louder explosion rocked the ground, flames bursting to our left, sending a shockwave through the crowd. Chaos erupted. People screamed and began to scatter, their focus shifting from solidarity to survival in an instant. "Stay together!" Maria shouted, struggling to protect her child as panic rippled through the assembled crowd. I positioned myself between them and the chaos, feeling an overwhelming mix of protectiveness and fear wash over me, and then, just as swiftly as it began, a single voice sliced through the tumult again. It was the denim-clad woman, moving towards us with a fierce determination unmistakable in her steps. "This isn't over," she shouted above the din, drawing closer, and I felt a surge of gratitude accompany my fear. "Where do we go?" I asked, meeting her gaze, desperate for direction and unity in the face of chaos, but as she spun to respond, a shattering sound echoed across our makeshift refuge, glass breaking, frying, panicking through the intermix of shouting and despair. Adrenaline surged in my veins, yet the hope thrumming just beneath the surface urged me forward, compelling me not to let go of all we had fought for, not when the stakes were at their highest, and just when I thought I could grasp the thread of hope within reach. The air thickened, heavy with impending dread. I could feel the foundations of everything I believed begin to tremble. The steadfastness of our collective courage was now spiraling into uncertainty once more. As reality spiraled and shadows deepened, the question that burned in my heart remained unanswered: would our resolution withstand the violence closing in, or would we be swallowed by the very despair we sought to combat? The chaos around me felt suffocating, a storm cloud of panic growing in pitch as the crowd surged and swayed. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, drowning out the pleas and shouts that rose and fell like the tide. Yet, amidst the tumult, I felt a flicker of clarity cut through, a faint whisper urging me to focus on the path ahead. Maria crouched beside her child, shielding her with a trembling arm, while the denim-clad woman took charge of our scattered group, her voice a beacon in the chaos. "This way. Stay low," she instructed, pointing towards an alley about 10 feet away that seemed to promise refuge. The edges of my vision were blurred with fear, but a single thought surged through the disarray: we needed to run, hold on to each other. I called out, my voice cracking under the weight of urgency. I extended my hand to Maria, who grabbed it instinctively, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. The child clung to her side, her eyes wide with confusion. I wished I could erase the horror from her gaze, but all I could offer was a sense of solidarity in our flight. We sprinted through the chaos, dodging panicked bodies and debris that fell around us like autumn leaves. As we neared the alley, I glanced behind us. The young man who had stood up for us was still there, his expression resolute as he pushed against the tide of chaos, trying to help others find their way. My heart ached at the thought of leaving him behind, but survival took precedence. Maria propelled herself forward, her determination igniting a fire in me that overcame the trepidation clawing at my chest. We ducked into the narrow alley, the world outside fading momentarily as we took grasp of fleeting safety. The darkness embraced us, and for just a split second, the chaos dulled, allowing room for the tremors of anxiety to soften into cautious breaths. "Are we safe?" the child whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf quaking in a breeze. I knelt down, my heart aching for the innocents wrapped up in such a devastating situation. "Yes, we are," I murmured, forcing warmth into my tone even as doubt coiled around my heart. I caught Mariah's eyes, and though they glistened with unshed tears, the fierce resolve behind them told me she would not falter. Together, we would ignite that spark of hope that remained within us. The woman in denim scanned the alley's end, her face a mask of concentration. "We should stay here for a moment," she said. "Let the chaos pass, let the soldiers move away." The decision hung heavy in the air, fraught with uncertainty and yet tainted with the knowledge that they could return at any moment. As we crouched in dim light, time stretched endlessly. Silent breaths filled the void as we exchanged anxious glances. The child snuggled closer to Maria, and I could sense the warmth of connection solidifying between us. A fragile sanctuary built on shared terror and fierce dedication. Then came the distant throbs of explosions, dark reminders that the outside world remained mired in brutality. We winced with every pulse, unable to escape the reality that surrounded us. It felt wrong to rest while a monsoon of suffering poured just beyond our thin walls of safety. "It's not fair," the child lamented softly, her grip tightening around Maria's arm. My heart twisted painfully at the innocent burden she bore. I wanted to shield her from the world, to cocoon her in warmth and safety, yet the reality remained harsh and unyielding. "It's not," Maria echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. The lines of her face deepened with each trembling breath. "But we will find a way, we have to." Her gaze shot upwards, as if seeking an answer in the shadows above. The air was thick with emotion, layers of sadness and fear etched into every corner of our temporary sanctuary. Suddenly, the sound of boots clattering against pavement rang ominously close. The woman raised her finger to her lips, her eyes wide, signaling us to silence. Each of us pressed into the stone walls, hearts pounding and breath stolen, as soldiers passed mere inches from where we crouched in the dark. The tension tightened around us, straining against the quiet air. I could feel my thoughts spiraling, the knots of dread tightening in my belly. Yet I couldn't help but notice a thread of kindness emerging from the chaos. As the soldiers moved past, I glimpsed one of them. His eyes were weary, hauntingly familiar, and for a brief moment, I felt a tidal wave of recognition crash over me. He looked like a ghost from my past, someone I had tried to forget. My pulse quickened. Could it be? Before I could delve deeper into that realization, the crowd erupted once more, uproar roaring from the street beyond the alley mouth. Wild shouts filled the air, and the sense of dread returned, monstrous and consuming. Fear flooded my veins, a sharp reminder of the reality we faced. "Go." The woman ordered suddenly, her voice a harsh whisper, a jolt that shattered the calm formed in despair. "What?" Maria gasped. "We can't just, there's no time. We have to find a safer place. Now." The urgency in her tone struck a chord, compelling action even as dread clung to the edges of my mind. Feeling the weight of countless eyes upon us, unable to shake the remnants of fear, I took a step forward, resolving to break the cycle, unwilling to let despair dictate our path any longer. In that moment, as I turned, I realized my hands trembled not with fear, but anticipation. We were now faced with the choice to either accept our fates or take our chances. Would we venture into the chaos, driven by hope or prompted by despair? But as I looked towards the alley entrance, a suspicion coiled within me, intertwining with the fear. Was there something vibrant waiting for us beyond the veil of smoke and noise, or merely death glaring back in response? It was then that a shadow crossed our path, the familiarity of that soldier now unmistakable. His eyes locked onto mine, recognition shining through the fear, and all the questions that lingered rushed to the surface. Unyielding, please, he mouthed with desperate urgency, just as chaos began to envelop us again. My heart faltered. By choosing to step into the unknown, would my journey lead me to the answers I longed for, or would it force me deeper into the shadows of my turbulent past? Before I could grasp the weight of my choice, the figure surged forward, and the world exploded around me, all sense of time lost in the chaos as I stood on the precipice of revelation, a ruin. The echoes of the explosion reverberated through the alley, shaking the very foundation of the fleeting sanctuary we had created. My heart raced as fear and confusion swirled around me, yet even amidst the trembling noise, I felt an old, familiar ache resurfacing, one that sang of memories long buried. The soldier's eyes were a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding us. They bore an intensity that cut through the noise, linking our pasts in a moment that felt both surreal and haunting. Did he recognize me, too? My breath hitched as questions danced in the corners of my mind. How many lives had been turned upside down since the last time we met? The answer felt like a weight, unbearable yet grounding. Without pausing to think, I stepped forward, my instinct screaming warnings, drawing closer to whatever lay in the tendrils of memory. But as quickly as I thought to reach out, another boom shattered the air, and I felt the heat wave from the blasts reach us, rippling through the very fabric of our reality. Don't. The woman in denim barked, her tone sharp, but my heart was already in turmoil. Even as fear gripped me with icy fingers, the curiosity that swelled felt unnaturally warm, almost magnetic. The world around me dimmed in comparison to the light casting from his gaze, filled with a rush of unspoken apologies and heartfelt hope. Serena? The soldier whispered, his voice barely audible above the disarray outside. It was enough to ignite a fire of recognition deep within me. Why had I buried him so deeply? Memories flooded back of simpler times, laughter shared over coffee, late-night conversations about dreams and fears, plans that felt so full of promise before life and fate had swept us into separate realms. I thought you were, the words hung tauntingly in the air, the bitterness of their truth drifting between us like a ghost. I hadn't anticipated the weight of his return. It felt like inviting the storm back into my life. Please, we need to go, he insisted, his voice low but urgent. The tension soared as he took a step closer, hands out as if grounding himself to me. You shouldn't stay here. That I hesitated, torn between the undeniable bond that anchored me to him and the grim reality of our circumstance. With each beat of my heart, he became both a beacon of hope and a reminder of everything I had lost in the whirlpool of this chaotic world. My gut twisted with uncertainty. What path would lead us away from the depths of despair? Maria was watching, fear etching into her brow as she moved the child closer, protective beyond reason. Can you trust him? She whispered, glancing between us with an urgency I felt herself. It was a fair question. Could I trust my memories and feelings in a world so fraught with danger? Trust? I echoed back, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. What did trust mean in a place where loyalty was often lost in the wake of survival? But as I searched his face, it felt like home amid the storm. Beneath the layers of dirt and despair was a familiar warmth that beckoned me, pulling me toward a fragile possibility. Please. This time, he sounded desperate, eyes reflecting everything which had come to pass since we last met. I could see the sacrifices he had made etched into the lines of his face, a testament to the pain he bore. And in that moment, something shifted within me, the knot of doubt loosened ever so slightly. Perhaps he had survived the chaos, and perhaps so could we. With a shaky breath, I nodded. I trust you, I said, even as the shadows of fear lingered in my chest. I needed to believe there was some grace left in this world, some way out of the labyrinth of pain. Then let's move. His voice cut through the turmoil, breaking the stalemate with a fierce urgency. The moment hung between us, fragile and raw, stretching the gap between past memories and present realities. We did not have time to dwell on what had been lost. As we hurried down the alley, I dared to catch an ounce of hope amidst the despair, not just for myself, but for Maria and her child. Each step felt heavier than the last. Laden with the burdens of our respective journeys, yet every step also brought us closer to relinquishing the hold of fear. But amid our hurried escape, a scream split the air behind us, a shrill, piercing wail from within the rumble, a sound that felt both familiar and horrifying. It was a mother's cry, echoing from a nightmare I had hoped we could escape. I froze mid-step, heart thrumming against my ribs as recognition washed over me. That voice belonged to someone from the crowd, someone whose suffering reflected the anguish of us all. "Keep going." The woman shouted, grasping my arm with an urgency that shook me from my daze. We were losing precious moments, moments we could never reclaim. But the agony in that scream loomed larger than the storm. It cut me deeply, resonating in every corner of my heart. I can't leave her. I knew the dangers that lay beyond the alley, yet my heart remained captive to the cries of another, caught in the web of humanity, too complex to navigate. "She's not your responsibility," Maria insisted, her eyes wide with desperation, yet I saw the flicker of understanding there too, echoing her own past pain. But just as my knees gave way to the weight of indecision, that haunting cry rang out again, almost pleading. It struck my heart with an urgency that transcended personal fear. It was a reminder that in this broken world, our connections were the last threads binding our humanity. Before I could think rationally about what awaited me outside those darkened walls, I felt my feet moving towards the sound of suffering, towards something that could either catapult me into a new understanding or drag me deeper into despair. With every echoing wail, the deep-seated urge to help surged forth, urging me onward into the unknown. "Serena." The soldier called, his voice lost to the chaos. The warmth of his gaze burned behind me, but I sprinted toward the cries, determined to tether my soul to the lives intertwined in pain, unwilling to lose that last sliver of connection to the humanity we all shared. In that fractured moment, I glanced back just as a flicker of something unnameable flared in the soldier's eyes, and I lost myself in the blinding pulse of chaos engulfing me anew, not knowing whether I would find a lifeline or simply surrender to the depths of despair again. The cliff of uncertainty loomed, and I felt every nervous heartbeat as I plunged into the chaos, drawn toward the call of another life, unaware of what would await me at its end. The screams reverberated in my mind like a distorting echo, twisting my thoughts into a knot of dread and resolve. My feet pounded against the cracked asphalt, each stride pulling me deeper into the tangled heart of the chaos. With every hesitant breath, I felt the urgency of the world spinning around me, threatening to swallow me whole. I was a moth drawn to the flame, navigating the precarious divide between survival and compassion. "Serena." The voice of the soldier fell behind me, strained and laced with fear. And yet, in that brief distraction, I couldn't help but feel the tug of an unseen thread binding us. With every ounce of my being, I pushed forward, heart racing in synchrony with the desperate cries that echoed in the contrasts of life unfolding before me. The alley opened into a wider street, littered with debris and shadows, where devastation sat heavily in the air like a thick fog. I scanned the fray for the source of the heart-wrenching screams. Through the haze, I spotted a figure kneeling over something small, crumpled on the ground, a woman, her clothes torn and disheveled, cradling a child close to her chest. No. It was like staring into a mirror reflecting back all my fears. The sight jolted me, my breath catching in my throat. The mother's face was a mosaic of anguish, and I knew her heart was being shattered into a million pieces, much like the world around us. "Please." My voice rose above the cacophony. I didn't care if I risked drawing attention. "I can help." The woman's tear-streaked gaze met mine with a mix of hope and despair, and in that moment, I learned the truth that pain was universal, yet navigating it alone felt insurmountable. "Help him, please. I can't lose him." Her voice trembled, raw and pleading, and I found the ground beneath my feet slipping away, fear twisting tighter around my chest. I knelt alongside her, drawn to the child's still form, the softness of innocence captured in fragility. Time swirled disorientingly. I felt the familiar grip of the soldier behind me, his presence a grounding force wars had stripped away from me for so long. His urgency clashed with my desperate desire to offer solace. "Get back!" he shouted, though his eyes were drawn to the child in a mutual recognition of helplessness. "How old is he?" I asked, my hands hovering hesitantly over the small body. A flicker of life could still bloom. Hope was still possible amidst the utter destruction. Point 2, the mother choked out, brushing her fingers through the child's curls. Please, he's my everything. Tears blurred my vision, mixing with the dust and despair drifting ominously in the air. I didn't know what to do. The echoes of that little boy's life weighed so heavily on my fragile heart. I reached out instinctively, fingers trembling as they brushed against the child's forehead. His skin was cool, too cool. That we need to get him away from here, I said, fighting to maintain the frantic rhythm of my thoughts. For what? She sobbed, a shudder swallowing the last of her strength. The faint spark in her eyes was gradually snuffed out by despair. We're all going to die here. This place, it eats hope. Not yet. I gripped her arm tightly. We can't give up. Not when he needs us. The brush of my conviction seemed to touch her, igniting a glimmer of determination to stir in her weary eyes. With urgency swelling in my chest, I cradled the child's small form, vulnerability wrapping around him like a shroud. I could feel the warmth of life still lingering, and the mother's breath caught in a gasp, mirroring the tremor of my own heart. Please, the soldier's voice broke through, panic lacing his words. We need to go. Just then, I heard the distant sound of sirens, an anguished wail rising to meet the air filled with destruction. The reminder that help might be on the way pulled at me, but so did the awareness that time dwindled like sand slipping through fingers. Take him, I urged her. We can find shelter. I won't leave you both behind. The mother hesitated, horror threading through her features. I can't. What if there's always a way? My voice rose, slicing through her doubts. I took another drastic step forward, fusing the mother's gaze with mine, praying she could feel the sincerity of our shared desperation. Let's not lose our fight. As if summoned by our fragility, some semblance of determination flared anew in her. She reached for her child, and I passed the boy into her trembling arms, the act swirling with unexpected weight. As she pulled him close, the love she poured forth fueled something larger than our individual fates. But before we could move, a horrific explosion erupted nearby, flames licking toward the sky as the very world around us fractured. Go! The soldier shouted, taking my hand and pulling me back toward the alley we had fled. I stumbled, glancing back at the woman and her child, uncertainty gripping me like an iron vice. We can make it. His voice dragged me through the haze, snapping me back to the harrowing reality. Time warped as I felt the momentum of the chaos push us forward, yet my eyes were drawn back to the mother's petrified expression. Her child sputtered a quiet whimper. I could love that child like my own, but uncertainty gnawed at my resolve, and with that last look lingering in the air like a promise, we bolted down the alley, hearts racing amidst the storm, the boundaries of compassion, fear, and survival colliding with ferocity. I could still hear that child's faint whimper mingling with the echoes of uncertainty surrounding us, a stark reminder of the fragile cords that tethered us all to each other in a world gone mad. But as we rounded the corner, the soldier stumbled, his foot catching on an unseen edge, and in that split second, everything I had fought for felt suspended in the air, reality shifting like sand between our fingers. Suddenly, a scream pierced my heart again, and a chilling realization shot through me. Wait, there's someone behind us. I screamed, as we turned only to find darkness closing in. The weight of our fragmented choices hung heavy in the air. Had I unknowingly led us to a darker fate? Whatever happened next, I knew the specters of our pasts would intertwine and unfold further, the magnitude of choices spiraling away into the unknown. We were running now with desperation behind us, yet something far more significant lay waiting ahead in the chaos. The world around me morphed into a blur of shadows and chaos as we sprinted down the alley, hearts racing, breaths hitching in unison. I could feel the echoes of anguish and loss pressing into my back, the frail grip of terror urging me not to look back. Behind me, the soldier's presence was both grounding and disconcerting. Each footfall reverberated through my body like a drumbeat, the relentless rhythm of survival competing against the clamor of despair trailing our escape. It felt surreal, but in that moment, nothing mattered more than getting to safety. Keep moving, he urged, his urgency igniting my own. My mind whirred with thoughts of Maria and the child, images fracturing into a montage of pain and fear, yet clarity settled into my chest. The undying spirit of humanity soared over the deafening roar of chaos. As we dashed around a corner, the distant sirens were drawing closer, mingling with the fray of shouting voices and shattered glass. We burst into another alley, darker still, the shadows thickening around us like an embrace that concealed secrets left unspoken, but then something gripped my heart, a finger of dread pulling me back from my forward momentum. I suddenly remembered the woman and her child, the desperate hope in her eyes, and the tremble in her voice. Guilt stabbed at me, a profound ache that threatened to eclipse the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Wait. We can't leave them. I blurted out, pulling back instinctively, hopelessly caught between my own burgeoning sense of survival and the fierce compassion that had bubbled forth since the moment I first approached Maria. Serena, we don't have time. The soldier insisted, desperation cracking through his voice, yet I could no longer ignore the call of duty that reverberated within me, an echo of every journey I had faced and every moment of kindness I had encountered. Please. Just give me a moment. I pleaded, igniting the spark of determination that burned deep within me. The soldier's gaze trapped mine, a battle waging behind his eyes that slowed the pace of the world around us. If we go back, he warned, we might not come out again. An unmistakable tension settled in that instant, woven through the air between us. In my heart, I knew I had taken a stand for Maria, for the legacy of hope she represented, but to simply abandon another in need, could I reconcile with that decision? Think of the others, he pressed, catching the glint of my resolve and twisting it with calculated urgency. Think of the lives we can save. And just then, a piercing scream sliced through the air, visceral and raw. The sound wrapped around my heart like a vice, freezing me in place. I couldn't ignore it. It resonated cruelly in my soul, urging me to act. I'm not leaving. The defiance in my voice surprised even me. We have to try. In that heartbeat, clarity surged within me, and it ignited my feet to move. Stay here. I cried, darting back toward the remnants of chaos, a fierce inner compass pulling me toward that haunting plea. No, Serena. The soldier shouted, yet the agony of the moment propelled me forward, feeling like an electric current through my veins. I maneuvered through the labyrinth of debris, navigating shadows and pulse-pounding uncertainty with each step. The screams grew closer, hydra-headed, each one intertwining with the narrative of fear that echoed around me. I rounded the last corner and burst into the open space of the street, desperately seeking the source of the cries. I found her, the woman. The depth of her suffering manifested in the wildness of her eyes. She was still there, embracing the child desperately, fighting against an oppressive force threatening to snatch away her love. My heart broke anew at the sight, and against all reason, I forged ahead. Let's go. I shouted, rushing forward to bridge the gap. We need to move now. She looked up at me, an array of confusion and terror splayed across her features. Who are you? She stammered, fear reflecting back in her gaze. I'm here to help. I asserted, and instinctively fell into position beside her, extending my hand toward the chilled, a simple lifeline. Just trust me. We have to leave. The moment stretched taut as tension crackled, uncertainty looming close. But the flames around us were rising, the cries of anguish igniting within me a resilience I had not known existed. At once, the terrible weight of the past began to dissolve, the memories, the fears, the regrets, each tumultuous breath releasing a thread that connected me to her despair. Come with me, I urged, reaching to cradle the small child, feeling the warmth of life nestled against the cold fury of uncertainty. The mother's grip loosened as I took the boy into my arms, desperate to offer comfort, to be a vessel for hope. A sudden ferocious wind blew past, as if daring us to surrender. But as I turned back toward the alley, resolve surged through me. I would not allow despair to claim its victory. Let's move. My words bolstered her as we maneuvered back, but reality pressed down heavily, forcing us to forge through the chaos. Every step was a race against time as I felt her tentative belief bond with my own ardent resolve. As we reached the safety of the alley, the soldier was waiting, his eyes widened with an energy that was almost ethereal. But the moment he caught sight of the small figure clutched in my arms, disbelief nodded through his expression, a timeline of choices and fractures colliding. "What have you done?" he breathed, the weight of reality settling over his features like a shroud. "This is how we make our stand," I declared with conviction, feeling the pulse of life beneath my hand. The child's heart was a constant reminder of everything worth fighting for. In that charged silence, amid the growing chaos looming at the periphery, a sudden understanding blossomed between us, sprouting from the depths of our individual journeys, the bond of our shared humanity. I understood his fears, the weight of the world upon his shoulders. But even in the impending shadow, I felt something vital coalescing within us, a fierce resilience threaded through the core of hope and connection that had forged this unlikely alliance, and as we pressed forward, racing against the tide of uncertainty, the world became a canvas of possibility, painted with the determination of lost souls refusing to surrender to despair. Together, we could harness the power of our shared plight, knowing we had already reshaped our destinies by refusing to abandon one another, and in that moment, as we plunged deeper into the darkness with heads held high, I understood at last that sometimes hope arises from the bitter ashes of despair. It burgeons in the warm embrace of compassion and connection, unfurled like a fragile flower born from the ruins of struggle. The flicker of that realization would linger long after the storm had passed, a reminder whispered in the folds of my heart: we rise together, or we fall apart. And as I took that first courageous step into the unknown, I knew we would find our path forward no matter the cost, no matter the fear. Together, we would emerge into the light, forever moving toward the promise that a compassionate world held both in its shadows and, beautifully, beyond them.